Hey, welcome to Gold Scratch, and welcome back, everyone, and welcome new subscribers. Our subscriber list is going, so I got to remember to ask you that early. Please subscribe, like, all that stuff, and YouTube will show it to someone else. So anyway, this is a little different kind of a video, and as you can see, I'm doing the camera work myself. Alex is walking on the beach somewhere in the Caribbean right now. He doesn't care about me right now, so I'm on my own, and Paul brought me this engine, and it's Paul Van Speck. I did an engine for his dad, Henry, about 4 or 5 years ago, and I've never seen this engine before. Last night he brought it to me. He had it in an S10, and it's kind of a unique piece. It's an 010 block, and it's got 292 cylinder heads on it, and 292 but they're angle plug cylinder heads. When's the last time you saw them? They're pretty rare, and I guess the theory was you get that spark plug more in line with the exhaust flow, and it's supposed to help. I don't know if it did or not, but they're still pretty cool heads. So I think this engine was originally in a Corvette. It's got a Performer RPM intake manifold. So it's got some nice parts, some comp, forged rocker arms, big valve springs, I can see just by looking at them. So it's got a cam of some kind in it. We don't know that. So, but the task that I have is really to repair this at minimal cost and minimal amount of work. So the reason I'm doing it this way, it's still hanging on my hook where I received it last night, and so I can move it around. So what tests can I do without taking it all apart? Because what Paul described was it's got a knocking sound, more at idle. It seems to go away when he revs it up. Yeah, it could be a rod bearing, and if it is, then we've got major surgery coming. But just in case, the steps I'm going to take are what tests I can do on the outside of the engine without taking it apart. And then if I have to take it apart, the next step would be, if I don't find anything, I'm going to do a leak down, and I'll describe that in a minute. If I don't find anything with a leak down, then the next thing I'm going to do is put it on the build stand, take it outside with my high pressure washer and clean it up. It's a mess, and I can't work on it like this. But my point is of doing the leak down, if I find something like 100% leak down or a huge number, then I can tell Paul it's got to come apart anyways. So then we're into estimating a rebuild, basically. So the noise could be a knock in a wrist pin, a connecting rod, but it could be something like a valve lifter collapse, possibly. I didn't get to hear the noise. If I don't find anything with this process, the next step, it goes on the run stand, I start it up, and then I can hear it myself and diagnose the problem. I'll also do a compression test when it gets on the run stand, and that, of course, will tell me a lot more about what's going on. I can't do compression tests on the build stand. So how do I do a leak down test with the engine just hanging on the hook? Well, here's how. So I took the valve. I don't have a distributor in the engine. Paul had an MSD distributor. We took that out. I'm not going to be using it. And so I can tell what cylinders are at top dead center firing by the valves. So what I did was, there's 4 marks on the balancer. So I found top dead center. That's the top dead center mark. Then I sectioned it off every 90 degrees. So I know every 90 degrees. So if that's number 1 firing, that's number 8, number 4, number 3, number 6, number 5, 7, 2. And I can go around that way. Because to do the compression test, or leak down test, I need the piston at top dead center. So to make sure that the piston doesn't move, because it's going to, spark plugs are all out when he brought it to me. I use this little claw device that I bolt on the back, and it locks against the ring gear, flex plate, or you might call it ring gear or flex plate, and that prevents it from turning. So I'm going to just do one, and then I'm going to do the rest. And the next step is we'll come back to you with stage 2 when we find out what the leak down is. But I've got my leak down tester connected. It's got to be connected to 100 psi, 80 to 100 psi of air pressure, which it is. My air pressure thing is on, and so I'm going to hook up and see what I got. So the cylinder can't turn. Now I'm at number 5 because I determined from where the valves were, if that's 1, 8, 4, 3, 6, 5, and so it's not 8, so it's 5. I can just tell by feeling the valves. The valves aren't there's clearance in the valves, and the other possibility it's 8, and 8 valve I can tell is open just by feeling it. So I know where to start. You can start anywhere you want. I'll go 5, 7, 2, then I'll go back up 1, 8, 4, 3, 6, and I'll be done. Start wherever you are. Let's see what I got. So you can, hopefully you can see my gauge there, and this engine is not going to turn. So we're going to hook up. Wow, that is 5% leak down. So this cylinder, that part of the cylinder is okay. 5% is one of the best numbers I've ever seen with any engine, even professionally built engine where they take a lot of time with honing, etc., to get a great finish. That's a really good number. Now that's only one cylinder. I'll unhook that and we'll stop here, and I'm going to go through the rest on my own and come back to you with the next step. If it's going on the test stand, we're going to wash it up and start it up and listen to it if we have to. So let's see what happens. So we're back. The leak down test is done. I'm on my own, so I backed the camera up a little bit. You could see when I built my shop, my previous shop I had where I used to live, I did the same thing. I put a beam in the ceiling. Pretty handy for loading and unloading engines. I don't need a cherry picker. I hope I'm visible. Anyway, I've done the leak down test as promised. Doesn't take very long. I use my little claw here, as you can see, to hold the engine from turning while I put compressed air into it. And there are the results. So we started off at number 5 because that's where we happen to be. And I can determine by the action of the valves where I am. And I sectioned off the harmonic balancer to follow the timing order. So it started off really good. 5%, 6%, 10%, 12%, 9%. Whoops. Number 4 cylinder is 40. Number 3 is 28. Number 6 is 20. So we were doing really good, but 40 is too much. Now, how much is too much? The worst would have been 20. I wouldn't have been too worried about it. In fact, if they would have all been, in the range of 10, if I had to repair this engine for Paul, I probably would have said, let's just clean up the rings and cylinders and reuse them, because there's nothing wrong with them. If they got 5 or 6% leak down, there's nothing wrong with them. But when you get 40%, you got to be concerned about it. So how did that happen? There's 3 ways it can leak: intake valve, exhaust valve, and normally there's always some leakage past the piston rings into the crankcase, and that's normal. And usually when you have a good engine with 5 or 6%, it's all that way, and there's no leakage past the valves whatsoever. So I did use, when I had the 40% one, my little modified mechanic stethoscope here. I modified this, just use one ear. So I can't listen to the intake valve, obviously, because I got the engine plate on it right now. No noise coming out of the exhaust valve. It sounds like it's all going into the combustion chamber, into the crankcase. That could be telling us something about the problem. A couple of things I noticed to point out about this engine. Somebody spent some money on it. It's got 3/8 push rods. I mentioned already, I think, the comp forged aluminum rocker arms. These engines came with a flex plate. These cylinder heads, 1970 to 292 heads. It came with guide plates, not a flex plate, I'm sorry. Came with guide plates. So some pretty good stuff in this engine. So what do I do next? So I stop there and say, Paul, we got 40% leak down, the head's got to come off. Let's take it apart. Or do I put it back on the test stand and run it? And I can listen to the noise myself, check oil pressure, etc., and decide where to go next. Well, we've got to think about it. We'll get back to you. So we made a decision. So I showed in the previous clip, we did a leak down test and we have 40% on the worst, 28 on another, and 20%. So that tells me that there's something going on. That's probably not what's making the knock sound, to be fair. But I can't fix that without taking it apart. So the next option was to clean it up, put it on my test stand, and start it up and run it, and I can monitor the oil pressure and listen for the leak, etc. But there's really no point in doing that because it's got to come. The heads have got to come off. If the heads are going to come off, flip it around, take the oil pan off, and let's start checking bearings and find out. From what Paul told me, pretty sure we're going to find a connector rod knock, but I wanted to kind of try and eliminate that. So thank you for watching this video. Please like and subscribe, and we will make subsequent videos of this engine as we get it cleaned up, stripped down, and take it apart and analyze what's wrong and give Paul an estimate of what it's going to take to repair it. Thank you for watching Gold's Garage.